Good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you very much for staying at a 7 p.m. on a Sunday evening to join us in this panel, which we're honored to have Ambassador Moctezuma and Ambassador MacKay with us today. This, of course, as you know, we also extend an invitation to Ambassador Johnson, who had confirmed his participation, but given the government shutdown in Washington, is unable to join us. I want to recognize that because a North America panel needs the United States, Mexico, and Canada. So today, we are very honored to have in person the Ambassador of Mexico to the United States, Ambassador Moctezuma. Thank you for being here with us. And the Ambassador, of course, the Ambassador of Canada to Mexico, Ambassador MacKay. Thank you very much. So as you know, the ambassadors were appointed, Ambassador Moctezuma 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, to Washington, and Ambassador MacKay almost a year ago to Mexico. During this period, there has been a number of items in the agenda, ranging from migration to security to USMCA. And of course, all of that has been marked by many tweets, by many mañaneras, by many news conferences. And the title of this panel is Feeling Good. But feeling good is not only about optimism. It is about trust. It is about shared priorities and reciprocity. We'll explore in this panel whether we should be feeling good. And if not, how can we feel good? And what is our role to make sure that that is a common sentiment among our region? So I'll start the panel by passing the word to Ambassador Moctezuma so that he can share with us how this shifted, particularly over the last year. As you can recall, in last year's North America, the North Capital Forum, the panel was called Hey Brother. And today it's Feeling Good. So Ambassador Moctezuma, have we moved from being family to just feeling good? And as you look forward to, particularly now towards the end of the year, what are the top priorities in strengthening the North America relationship from migration to security to trade? Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a very, very important occasion to strengthen all the ideas, principles, work everybody has to build a competitive, strong North America. I think that we will never leave Mexico and the U.S. Identity as neighbors, as friends, as brothers and family, and as roommates, because the things we share, not only the border, but also the peoples, 38 million Mexican descendants in the U.S., and about 2 million here in Americans in Mexico. It's already in our DNA. So that's who we are. And I think that the most important thing is not how North America will integrate itself, but how fast, how deep, because I think that's our destiny. Now, that being said, this last year has been very challenging, of course, but what makes you feel good, someone that is analyzing data and analyzing objectively facts, is that the relationship has been rooted in each time stronger roots. You mentioned security. In the visit of Marco Rubio to Mexico, he said I try to remember literally what he said. He said there has never been historically any time with a better security cooperation between the U.S. and Mexico than today. Not with any country and in Mexican history. If the head of the State Department says that privately and publicly, that's something that nobody would imagine last January. And why did he say that? He said that because President Sheinbaum has been dealing with this issue and always trying to deliver results that can be measurable. So you can see that she sent 10,000 National Guard agents to the border in order to deal with drug trafficking and weapons and arms trafficking from the U.S. to Mexico. That she sent already 55 drug lords to the U.S. And these are very, very important actions that show her will to help to work together, cooperate, collaborate, but always making sure that both countries' sovereignty is absolutely respected. There are 26,000 people in jail in the last 8 months related to drug issues. So these are very important numbers that shows that there is a very important impact in the fight against drug trafficking in Mexico. And this was part of the one of the first conversations President Sheinbaum and President Trump. What you can see, she has spoken with him 14 times. I don't think any other leader in the world has spoken so many times with President Trump. And every time she speaks with him, she delivers. She has something important to say and commit. It's not just a good friend's call, but also she asks what Mexico needs. She also asks what Mexico wants and what are the principles we're based on. That's why these conversations are so productive. If you see labs, there have been 1,600 labs destroyed. And CBP's numbers, not Mexicans, CBP's numbers say that about half of the fentanyl that was coming before to the U.S., it's coming now. So there is a drop of almost half of the fentanyl seizures. I can continue with figures, but what I'm telling you is that these are very, very important issues that show the strength of the security cooperation and collaboration. The other issue is migration. President Trump said in the UN last week that now the U.S. has the strongest border in the world. And before, you couldn't believe that he would say that statement. And he said that not because only crossings from undocumented people, but also because of having a secure border. Related to crossings, he says that there are 0 crossings. Maybe we can say there is a negative crossings because there are more people going out than coming into the States. So you also see a very strong response and deliverable in the migratory issue. Now, why are we doing this? Because that's something that is within our policies. We want an orderly, secure migration. because that's for the benefit of our people. Undocumented people, undocumented workers don't have the rights they should have, and the protection and the social security that they need. So we are always asking the U.S. Precisely to expand legal pathways, because that's what we need in order to have a orderly migratory process. Also, the people that live in the U.S. that have more than 5, 10, 15 years living in the U.S., the DACA population, the Dreamers, are groups of population that President Sheinbaum is very, very near to, and she's always putting pressure in order to legalize their status. That is something that is in her agenda, and the U.S. and President Trump knows that very well. So what you can see is that every time we're feeling better. So we're feeling good that every time we're feeling better.
Ambassador Moctezuma, are those conversations in English between Sheinbaum and Trump, or does she have a official translator in those conversations?
The conversations are in English. Yes, she speaks perfect English.
Great. And when you mentioned about the migration improvements in terms of cooperation, but also, I would say, the uncertainty that many of the Mexican communities facing in the United States. Are you seeing more openness in terms of the Trump administration from the requests that the Mexican government is making to protect the way that our compatriotas are being treated in the U.S.?
There is a permanent vigilance by the consulates and the government of Mexico to protect our migrants and our nationals in the U.S. We are very aware of what happens every day in every place. And what we have agreed, of course, is that we will always give our nationals the information they need, the protection they need, the documentation they need in order to be in a better position.
Great.
The U.S. has all the rights to have the policy they want, but within the international law, their law, and our relationship.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Ambassador MacKay, I'd like to shift gears a little bit now. You have more than 25 years in Canada's diplomatic service. You've been positioned in Europe, in Asia, so you bring a global perspective to this new task in Mexico. What's your goal? How has the Canada-Mexico relationship evolved? And how is the recent visit by Prime Minister Carney to Mexico signaling a reshifting in priorities for Canada's foreign policy?
Well, I would say, first, just coming back to the feeling good theme, I want to thank Michael Bublé, a great Canadian, who serenaded us in with that. And so I agree with this theme of, feeling good, not naive, but optimistic about the future. And I think during Prime Minister Carney's visit, he and President Sheinbaum, each in their own way, said what I think the Canadian and Mexican goal is, which is to work together, strengthen our bilateral relationship in order to continue to make North America the most dynamic, competitive, inclusive, innovative region in the world. And we will do that partly by collaborating trilaterally, but also by collaborating bilaterally between each of the three countries. So again, I have been stationed around the world. I've seen, had some insight into many sort of economies and trade agreements around the world. And North America has everything that it takes to continue to have a world-beating platform on the economic side, but also for deeper collaboration on the political and the social side to make sure that this continues to be the best region in the world to live in.
Great. Tell us a little bit about the visit. What did they discuss? What did they agree? What was the outcome?
Yeah. So a great visit, very substantive and strategic. And let me step back a bit and say, I think, many people in the room will recall that almost a year ago, late November, when each country was hearing threats of new tariffs connected to the, to border and security issues coming out of President-elect Trump, that put some tension in the Canada-Mexico bilateral relationship. There's no question about that. That continued on for some months. Prime Minister Carney takes office in March, and one of the first leaders that he reaches out to is President Sheinbaum. Mm-hmm. They have a great first phone call. Then they have a second phone call. Then he says, look, I'm hosting the G7 summit in June, and I think you should come. Mm-hmm. Talk to me. Also, frankly, we had expected President Trump would stay the second day, and then all of the other G7 leaders and the outreach invitees are there. You can meet them all. And President Sheinbaum, of course, accepts that invitation. She comes to the summit. She has great meetings with everybody, but particularly, I think, with us, it's the first in-person meeting between the PM and the president, and they get along really well. Not surprising. They each have common challenges, of course, but also each of them, just their personalities, calm, cool, and collected. They each have PhDs in, economics and energy physics. I think they very much have a meeting of minds in what it is that they want to achieve, both pragmatic. And at that summit, she effectively says, you should come see us in Mexico and let's do more together bilaterally. So he comes. September 18th and 19th is when he was here. And in the lead up to that, officials are working very hard. I'm working very hard with Roberto Velasco, but in particular, the whole embassy team and the Mexican officials, not just in the SRE, but across the government in Mexico and across the government in Canada. Mm-hmm. The reason is the goal here is to take a relationship that has kind of waxed and waned. We've got more than 31 years of free trade, and so we've got strong trade relations and strong economic relations and lots of tourism, et cetera. But I mean, frankly, for two countries, two G20 economies, 9th largest economy in the world, and the 15th largest in the world, each $2 trillion plus economies. And we're trading, we have an economic relationship now that's well over $100 billion. That's about $56 billion in bilateral trade in goods, then about $45 billion in mutual investment, and then you get trade in services, tourism, education, et cetera. But for two economies that size, this is a pretty underperforming bilateral relationship, given that we are one another's oldest free trading partners. So there's a lot more we can do on trade, but also on security, and also on health collaboration, and also on environment and sustainability. And other areas. Mobility, we mentioned migration. We've got 52,000 Mexicans come to Canada every year under temporary foreign worker permits, 26,000 of them as part of this seasonal agricultural worker program. So it's frankly a model of orderly and secure migration. But we think that we can do more in all these areas. So when the leaders get together in September, what they agreed on was a new higher level relationship between us, a comprehensive strategic partnership with an action plan to underpin it, with 4 pillars on prosperity, on security, on mobility, inclusiveness and well-being, on environment and sustainability, officials working in working groups in all of these areas, etc. The leaders, I think in particular Prime Minister Carney, coming from the private sector and bringing that rigor to government, says, great plan, sounds nice. I want quarterly reports. Do you agree, President Sheinbaum? She says, of course. So not only have we got this action plan, we're now reporting every 90 days to the leaders on what we have accomplished across all these working groups. More than a dozen ministries and secretariats in Mexico working together on this, plan. But maybe the most important outcome from my point of view of this meeting and this plan going forward is they agreed right up in the first paragraph that there will be frequent meetings and communication between leaders and between Canadian ministers and Mexican secretaries. So we are, and then there will be quarterly reports about that. How often are we talking to each other? And in diplomacy, this matters. Showing up matters. Talking on the phone matters. WhatsApping each other, visiting each other, meeting on the margins of other summits around the world. We've got several secretaries now invited to come to the G7 Energy Ministerial, the foreign ministers meeting, et cetera, in Canada. There will be more of this, meetings between our political leaders. So you put all of that together, and I think definitively we have taken the Canada-Mexico relationship and taken it up one big step from anywhere it has been before. So it's substantive visit and strategic, because of course we've got big things to do next year. We will be reviewing the CUSMA, as we call it, the TMEC, the USMCA, and we're hosting the FIFA.
Yep.
And so we need to have these strong, this connective tissue between the political leadership of our two countries has to be strong, because next year is going to be a big and often challenging year to get through.
Yeah. And we'll dive deep into USMCA and the World Cup. Before, though, I want to touch upon security, because the security issue, as we all know, is being used as lever in terms of negotiations. We're no longer in a trilateral relationship where the security cooperation was dealt in one channel, whereas the migration item was dealt in another, channel, but they're all intertwined. So, Ambassador Moctezuma, this has been at the core of the back and forth between the bilateral relationship between U.S. and Mexico, whether it's on fentanyl trafficking, on arms control, on organized crime, and what is also being done in Mexico, within it, also the political spheres in Mexico. So a year from now, what concrete achievements are you expecting to result from a greater cooperation on the security front between Mexico and the United States? And what's the goalpost? Because it seems to me that it's constantly being altered.
Well, a year from now, I think that what we are going to gain is trust. I think that with concrete results and cooperation in both sides of the border, because also when this issue was raised by President Trump, and President Sheinbaum asked him also to deal with the illicit trafficking of weapons from the U.S. to Mexico. He was very sensitive about that. And as you learned, and Roberto Velasco said just a few minutes ago, after the meeting of Secretary Rubio, there is a follow-up of high-level officials, but on the operating sphere. So this meeting that was last Friday, it's a very important one because it's following up in very concrete issues regarding security. And this means that both countries recognize that the problem is shared, and that is not even regional. The problem is global, because the supply chain of the, if we can call it that, of all the drug trafficking starts in China and India, with all the precursors coming from there. And so the transnational criminal organizations operates in many countries. And the ones that operate in Mexico have to be dealt with a coherent and a regional approach. Because we see that you can fight the supply, but also there is a need to fight against the consumption side of the issue. So all this approach to deal with the issue together, and also with Canada, there is a very important conversation and dialogue regarding North American security dialogue. And these will join efforts of the governments in order to fight something that everybody wants to fight against. So 1 year from now, I believe that after working together for 2 years already, and seeing the results that have been delivered already, we will be in a much better situation in a bilateral relationship regarding security. And we will gain a lot of trust in each other.
Great. Ambassador MacKay, on security front, one would have thought that Canada would have never been one of the targets in terms of security cooperation from the U.S. demands, particularly on fentanyl. But what is your assessment in terms of where do you see the greatest opportunity for Canada in terms of security cooperation? Because even though Canada doesn't share a land border with Mexico, it is in the same neighborhood. So whatever happens on the bilateral front, security matters between Mexico and U.S. also impacts Canada. So what can you say about that?
Maybe first, I mean, as you were alluding to, the Canada-U.S. border is very different than
Correct.
the U.S.-Mexico border. And in terms of, the people and the drugs that President Trump has expressed concern about entering the U.S., less than 1% come from the northern border. But nevertheless, we are committed to making that border as strong and secure as we possibly can. And that's why the government earlier this year committed $1.3 billion to further strengthen the Canada-U.S. border. But maybe to broaden that out a little bit as well, we have a very long-standing, decades-long, very deep collaborative relationship with the United States on mutual defense. We're both members of NATO. And we're both members of, we jointly command NORAD. It is the only example on the planet of joint command of defense of a region. And so on that also, the Canadian government is really stepping up its commitment. Prime Minister Carney, when he was at the NATO Leaders Summit earlier this summer, he committed that we would take our 1.5% of GDP spent on defense and security last year, bring it up to 2% this year to meet the NATO target, and we will be hitting the 5% target by 2035. So that's a quadrupling up to roughly $160 billion Canadian of our defense investment. So we're making a very serious new generational step up in terms of our commitment on kind of hard defense and on the border. And there's more that we can do trilaterally as well. There's the North American Drug Dialogue that Canada will be hosting in November from a trilateral point of view. But just bilaterally, Canada, Mexico, we don't have a land border with Mexico, but we sure have an air border. So in high season, when the Canadian snowbirds are flying here in great numbers, and we expect as many as 3 million Canadians, almost 7% of the Canadian population
Comes to Mexico.
will visit Mexico this year.
Wow.
Like, it's astounding. So after the U.S., we're the number 2 supplier of tourists, and it's a huge service export from Mexico back to Canada. But I say that because at that period, there's 400 direct flights between the two countries every week. I mean, so we don't have a land border, but we sure have a lot of people moving back and forth, including 500,000 Mexicans coming to Canada every year. So that does bring, certain security challenges for both countries. And the leaders were clear about this when they met. When the leaders met and they were asked about security, I mean, Prime Minister Carney was clear. There is a presence of Mexican organized crime in Canada. There is also a presence of Canadian organized crime in Mexico. And neither government wants that. There are ties between our organized crime groups, and we want to be disrupting that. There's more we can do together on fugitives in each country. There's more that we can do on the drug trade. There's more that we can do on money laundering. There's more that we can do on cybersecurity. And if you go into the details of this action plan, these are the sorts of areas that we will be collaborating even more deeply than we have before, along with maintaining our longstanding defense collaboration between the Canadian Armed Forces and their Mexican counterparts.
Thank you. So security is foundational, but without a strong economic underpinning, trust may be fragile. And with that, I'd like to now transition to trade and the upcoming USMCA review, which, as we know, the first mandatory review will take place in 2026. And all 3 countries have already launched domestic consultation process to collect input from from various stakeholders. So Ambassador Moctezuma, Mexico exports to the U.S. have increased nearly 40% since the ratification of USMCA in 2020. From Mexico's standpoint, which parts work well, which parts can be improved leading up to the review process?
Well, I think that USMCA is a great story of success, and that both economies and Canada have really made very big progress with that framework. And of course, the economy has been changing a lot. There are new areas. All this morning, we have heard different lectures about how AI is coming into the economy, how many things are changing for the future economy that has to be tackled by the review of the agreement. So what we want is a stronger agreement that will benefit the three countries for the future economy. What we need also is to recognize that there is a regional economy that is complementary, that is not a competition between the three economies, but a region that takes the best out of the three countries in order to have complementary economies. And I think that the USMCA has a lot of examples to prove that, and to see how we have taken the best out of our countries. Now, regarding several issues that are on the table right now, and that are related to tariffs and some other policies, I really think that reality is very stubborn. And we have been starting hearing from President Trump himself saying, well, maybe we have to soften some things regarding the agricultural sector or the hospitality sector or the construction sector, because they see in the U.S. The impact of the measures they're taking, but mainly that the stakeholders are starting to work and be vocal, not in the media, but vocal in terms of their conversations with the president in order to tell him how important it is for the American companies to keep the agreement we have. So I think it's very important how this thing has evolved, and also if you look at the world, Mexico is doing better than most of the countries in the world regarding tariffs. And when President Trump started putting tariffs, he himself said, but we're not going to put any tariffs in the products that are under the umbrella of USMCA, which is a very important decision that shows how he is very aware of the importance of the treaty. So we see this review as a means to have a stronger, more efficient in terms of solving disputes, in terms of really having an architecture that will help our trade to grow. And the most important thing will be to see the whole forests and not just the trees. This is not a negotiation of two economies, the U.S. and Mexico, or two economies, the U.S. and Canada, or three economies only. This is a negotiation that will imply how a region is going to prevail against other regions of the world in this new trade revolution that is going on globally. And that means that for us to compete against Asian economies, and particularly China, and prevail in our economic efforts, we will need to work as a region. And I think that idea is a very important one that will complement the idea of just looking at the deficits in our bilateral relationship. One very strong thing about this is that this aligns perfectly with the Mexican policies. Because if you read Plan Mexico and what President Sheinbaum launched in terms of building a strong Mexican economy and having import substitution and having a regional approach, you will see that what we want to do is perfectly aligned with what the U.S. wants to do. And that will, of course, be a leverage for the review.
And to be clear, the scenario is this will be a review, not a renegotiation, correct?
Well, what is written in the agreement is to have a review precisely next year.
Great. Ambassador MacKay, what's Canada's strategy and priorities leading up to USMCA?
Let me say that, first, after 31 years of free trade between the three countries, we've gone way beyond just trading things with one another. We now make things together. We make cars together. We make aircraft together. We make any number of advanced manufacturing products in particular together. So to try to unscramble that omelet in North America would be, I think, ill-advised. We shouldn't be trying to undo the big, great things that we've done. So we would like the review to be narrow, to be very targeted in its scope. And if we can identify, Canada would happily see this as be just a review. That said, we are hearing out of Washington that there are things that they would like to renegotiate. If things need to be renegotiated again, let's keep it narrow and targeted and provide as much stability and predictability to business as we can. We think that business needs that. It's for that reason that all three countries now have launched their public consultations on what is it that business and civil society and academics and general citizens, what would they want out of this review. Canada actually had done this a year ago, so we were really maybe over-prepared. And now we have relaunched those public consultations. And I say that because I know there's a lot of private sector and civil society folks in the room, et cetera. I really encourage you to participate in those consultations. Write to your own government, write to the foreign governments, and tell us what it is that you need. Because government negotiators only, frankly, we get our instructions from the people. We need to know what they need. So we're not tabling things that, need to be renegotiated per se. But I think there are some principles that I think that all three governments would agree on. For example, that the benefits of the agreement really are for the parties to the agreement. And we are all facing some challenges, as Ambassador Moctezuma said, from non-market economies who are not trading fairly and who may be taking advantage of this agreement, and not to our benefit. So perhaps there's more that we can do in areas like that. And then again, as Ambassador Moctezuma said, the economy has changed, in the last few years. There's just the panel earlier today on AI, ethical use of AI. So we should be looking at all of those things as we undertake the review. But I think we should also not forget, the wise words of President Trump when we first finished the USMCA. And he said, this is the greatest trade agreement in the history of humanity. And it remains the case today. Can it be tweaked or improved a little bit somehow through the review? Let's look at that.
Yep.
But let's not make the mistake of undoing it.
Great. Very quickly to finalize the trade segment of the conversation. As you mentioned, Ambassador MacKay, there's a number of leaders in the private sector in the room, a number of leaders in the think tank community. what is your ask to them in terms of what your countries need from us to help you ensure that USMCA continues to be the anchor of North America competitiveness? So first ask you, and then it will turn over to Ambassador Moctezuma.
I would say be vocal, get engaged. So, look at the consultation documents that have been circulated by the governments of Mexico, the United States, and Canada, asking for your views, and respond to that. Respond to that in writing. We need the details. Get your trade lawyers on it and tell us what exactly it is that you want and why. Get your economic analyst to give us the numbers. We all need real specificity as to what it is that folks want. And frankly, at the same time, advocate to your political leadership. So write to in Canada, write to your member of parliament. In the U.S. and Mexico, write to the diputados, write to the congressmen, write to the senators, and tell them what you want. So if you don't tell government what you want, you're not going to get it.
Ambassador Moctezuma?
Well, I agree with Ambassador MacKay, and I think that the stakeholders of the agreement have to be absolutely vocal about it. Because people that are not aligned with this idea are vocal about being against it. So we need not just to balance the conversation, but to win the conversation. And something which is very important is really to have the consciousness that this agreement is not only good for your company. This agreement is good for North America. This agreement is good for the peoples, for the prices they pay for products, for the availability they have of different products, for the growth of their economies and their job creation. So I believe that there has to be a big participation during these consultations, but also during all the time from here to the review, in order to make everybody understand how this framework is not something about governments. This is something about peoples. This is something about our futures and our children's futures. Mm-hmm. Because if we really make the most competitive and humanistic region in the world, and we share not only the economy, but also values as we do, I think that we will inherit then a better region for our kids.
Great. Last question. So we're going to turn it up to a nicer tone. Mascots for the 2026 World Cup have been unveiled. Sayu, the jaguar in Mexico, Maple, the moose in Canada, and Clutch, the bald eagle in the United States. If each country's mascot had one message to deliver to the fans, what would that be? Ambassador MacKay.
Have fun. But, I want to emphasize this too. That was my one word, but this is definitively the biggest World Cup ever. It's the third for Mexico, but you've never had one quite so big. So 3 countries, 16 cities, 48 teams, 104 games. Like, we've never done anything so big before. So it's really going to be a lot of fun.
Ambassador Moctezuma?
Don't scream when the goalkeeper is going to shoot, please.
So friends, thank you very much for joining us. Let's not feel good. Let's feel great. Thank you. Thank you.